Hey everyone, I'm Casey Aiken. Now, when I was first writing these, I had originally intended to build up to today's Superman analog, but when trying to describe the various Supergirls that have existed, it was difficult to do so without referencing the classic model. So let's talk about Kara Zor-El, cousin of Superman, the once and future Supergirl. You see, when most people talk about Supergirl, they usually mean this one. Kara Zor-El was from Krypton, but made it to Earth after her family initially survived for a time adrift in the domed Argo City in space. Eventually, the city failed, and she was forced to flee to Earth, the last survivor of her community. Superman was not sure how to prepare her for the world initially, and thus hid her away in an orphanage where she took the name Linda Lee. Eventually, she had an equivalent of her debutante ball when she was adopted by the Danvers family, and she would go on to make her own way, starring in her own adventures and adopting a variety of period-appropriate outfits. And one thing I always loved about the character was her relationship with the future, air quotes, descendant of Braniac, Braniac 5, hero and member of the Legion of Superheroes. Long live the Legion! As time-lost members of warring houses, this was a delightful while wholesome version of Romeo and Juliet for the pulpy sci-fi set. And even if complications arose, it was such a nice touch. We tend to look back on Silver Age books as flat and simple, but this was such a refutation to that point. But anyway, this is where it gets a little sad. When DC cleaned house in the 80s, Supergirl died saving her cousin during an attack on an evil force from another reality. It is a goddamn brutal fight, and the weight of the conflict is palpable. And while the Barry Allen Flash is often remembered as the big casualty of the crisis, Supergirl doesn't even get the dignity of people remembering her loss, as she is shortly after wiped from continuity. Still, we got an amazing send-off, seeing Superman weep for her loss. Of all the big moments in Crisis on Infinite Earths, this is the one that moved me the most. Now, for a time, this was it for Kara Zor-El, but her presence in outside media going forward cemented her role as the Supergirl. It began with the Helen Slater-helmed Supergirl movie in the 80s, in the wake of the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. While not fondly remembered, it was remembered. And hey, we talked about that on Men of Steel. The animated DCU featured Kara in Z, who was an adopted cousin instead of a biological one for Superman. But for all purposes, the character is just the adaptation of Kara Zor-El for the medium. There was a version in Smallville too. And finally, Kara Zor-El is the basis for the recently concluded Supergirl TV show. And no joke, I freaking love this series. If you like Superman-related material, and you haven't checked it out, you owe it to yourself to do so. At times, it was truly inspirational and such a breath of fresh air from what we had been getting up until that point from DC, and really was the launching pad for the excellent Superman and Lois. Sure enough, the various media adaptations led to Kara being reintroduced decades later in the main DCU. She was first teased in the Many Happy Returns arc, where she crossed over with the 90s interpretation of Supergirl, and then she was permanently integrated into the DCU in the hugely popular Batman-Superman series. Since then, she has been a major player and the Supergirl of all the books. And I have to admit, I was dubious at first because of the excellent send-off the character got in Crisis on Infinite Earths. But since then, I have grown to love her latest tales. Supergirl is, in a real way, the best of Superman, and Kara Zor-El is the apex of that idea. She is willing to sacrifice everything to do what's right, but never gives up hope. However, Kara Zor-El was not the Supergirl I grew up with. So next time, we will be delving into the complicated story of Matrix. But until then, stay super, man. Hey, this is the part where I say thank you for staying to the end of the episode. Really appreciate everyone here. Please do all the YouTube stuff and also check out the podcast that goes along with this, Men of Steel. You can find it at certainpov.com. But just have a great week, guys.